What if I told you that depression isn't just in your mind, but in your biology? That the numbness, the hopelessness, the exhaustion, they're not personal failures. They're signals from a system that can be rewired. You are not broken. You're operating in a survival mode your brain was never meant to stay in. And the path out isn't magic. It's science. It's action. And it starts with one truth. You have more control than you've been led to believe. Depression is often misunderstood, not just by society, but by those who experience it. It's frequently mislabeled as a weakness or a lack of character, when in reality, it's a physiological state that emerges from complex imbalances within the brain and body. At its core, depression involves changes in neurochemistry, especially involving serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, neurotransmitters that help regulate mood, motivation, and emotional balance. But depression also involves changes in brain circuits, particularly those connecting the prefrontal cortex, the center of rational decision-making, and the limbic system, which governs emotional responses. These biological changes make it difficult to feel joy, anticipate rewards, or plan for the future. It's like the brain becomes locked in a mode of survival, shutting down anything that isn't essential. This doesn't mean a person is lazy or broken. It means the brain is adapting, albeit in a way that doesn't serve well over the long term. Recognizing depression as a physical and neurological condition helps to remove shame and replace it with clarity. And with that clarity comes the first step toward change: understanding. The most empowering realization for anyone struggling with depression is that this state is not fixed or permanent. The brain, for all its complexity, is not static. It is dynamic, capable of change, and designed to adapt to new information and environments. This is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to repeated experience. Neuroplasticity is what allows someone to recover from injury, learn new skills, and yes, emerge from depression. The very pathways in the brain that have reinforced sadness, numbness, or despair can be modified. This doesn't mean the process is quick or easy. It means it's possible. And possibility is the fuel for hope. When someone knows that their emotional state is supported by biological systems that can change, it opens the door to intervention, to action, to healing. It is no longer a story of weakness, but of biology, and biology can be influenced. This influence doesn't happen passively. It requires a person to take steps that, over time, begin to shift the way the brain operates. These steps might seem small, even trivial, but their impact compounds. Simple actions, like exposing the eyes to sunlight in the morning, establishing a consistent sleep-wake cycle, or moving the body for just 10 minutes, can begin to recalibrate the brain's chemistry. Light stimulates retinal ganglion cells that send signals to the hypothalamus, regulating not only sleep but mood. Movement triggers the release of dopamine and endorphins, neurotransmitters that improve well-being and motivation. These actions may seem like surface-level tricks, but they are deeply grounded in biological truth. Depression makes it hard to do these things, but doing these things is part of how depression begins to loosen its grip. Understanding this physiological side of depression doesn't erase the psychological pain it causes, but it reframes how we deal with it. Instead of waiting for motivation to strike, one can begin by acting, starting with something small and manageable. This may be as basic as drinking a glass of water, standing in the sun for a few minutes, or writing down a single thought. Each of these actions is a message to the nervous system. We are still engaged. We are not giving up. Over time, these repeated behaviors carve new pathways in the brain, ones that prioritize engagement, attention, and reward. The prefrontal cortex starts to regain control over emotional centers like the amygdala. The body begins to regulate itself more efficiently. What once felt impossible starts to become routine, not because the depression has vanished overnight, but because the person has taken back agency. Agency is the antidote to helplessness, and depression thrives on helplessness. When someone begins to understand the mechanics behind their suffering, it grants them a level of control. They may not be able to flip a switch and feel better instantly, but they can influence the conditions that shape their brain state. This is not magical thinking. It is grounded in biology. Tools like breathwork, resistance training, social connection, and even specific forms of cognitive reframing create measurable changes in the way the brain processes information. These aren't one-size-fits-all solutions, but they are options, and options mean possibility, and possibility is often what depression robs first. The goal is to restore that sense of possibility through knowledge and action, not through pressure to snap out of it, but through an understanding that the system is changeable. One of the most misunderstood elements of depression is how it distorts time and expectation. A person might feel as though the future has collapsed, that nothing will ever be different or better. But that perception itself is a function of the depressed brain. It is a cognitive and emotional mirage. The circuits that anticipate joy and future reward are underactive, not gone. The same brain that believes the future is hopeless is still capable of change, but it requires repeated exposure to new inputs, physical, emotional, and environmental, that contradict the depressive narrative. This can come in the form of structure, novelty, purpose, and support. Even small moments of awe, gratitude, or connection create neurochemical changes that begin to restore the brain's sense of forward movement. The future isn't lost. It's just momentarily out of view. People often say, "I just want to feel like myself again." But depression is not about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who you truly are, without the distortion. That self still exists, is simply being overshadowed by a state that makes everything feel numb, heavy, or pointless. But that state is not your identity. It is your current biology, and biology can be trained, supported, and healed. The most crucial part of recovery is remembering that your emotions are signals, not life sentences. They are messages about how your internal systems are functioning. When they are off, the body and brain need recalibration, not condemnation. You are not weak. You are operating under the weight of a system out of sync, and that system can be tuned back into harmony. No two experiences of depression are exactly alike, but they often share a common thread: the sense of being trapped in the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same fatigue, the same silence. But understanding the biology behind these experiences turns the locked door into something more manageable, a challenge that can be approached step by step. Depression doesn't mean you're failing. It means your brain is trying to conserve energy in the face of perceived threats or hopelessness. Once you understand that, you can work with your biology instead of against it. You can begin to provide it with the signals and patterns that slowly shift its direction. It takes patience. It takes repetition. But most importantly, it takes the belief that change is possible, and that belief is backed by science. Recovery from depression is not linear, and setbacks are not failures. They are part of the process. What matters is persistence, not perfection. Each day is another opportunity to send your brain the message that life is worth engaging with, that even in the absence of motivation, you can act. That action rewires your circuits. That rewiring changes how you feel. The process might be invisible at first, but it is real. The same way depression builds momentum, so does healing. And over time, what felt like survival becomes growth. What felt like endurance becomes strength. Not because the pain never existed, but because you built a system that could carry you through it into something new. The belief that we must feel good before we can act is one of the most dangerous illusions depression creates. When energy is low, when joy feels distant, and when the mind is clouded by hopelessness, waiting for motivation can trap someone in a cycle of inaction. But action, especially small, deliberate actions, is the trigger that reawakens the systems responsible for movement, drive, and desire. The human brain is wired to reward forward movement, even if it's incremental. A walk around the block, making the bed, or writing a single sentence can initiate changes in the brain's chemistry. These actions begin to stimulate the dopamine system, which plays a vital role in motivation and focus. They also activate the prefrontal cortex, helping shift attention away from passive rumination toward purposeful behavior. Every time you act despite how you feel, you send a signal to your nervous system. We are not defeated. Over time, this signal becomes a pattern, and that pattern becomes transformation. Dopamine, often misunderstood as the molecule of pleasure, is actually the molecule of pursuit. It drives effort, fuels ambition, and generates anticipation. In depression, this system becomes blunted or underactive, making even the thought of progress feel overwhelming. But dopamine systems are not fixed. They are feedback-driven. Each small task completed gives a burst of reinforcement, telling the brain that progress is possible. This isn't about delusion or toxic positivity. It's about biological momentum. When someone stands up, drinks water, or completes a workout, they generate a ripple effect through their neurochemical systems. That ripple can start small, but grows stronger with consistency. It's not about waiting to be rescued by motivation. It's about building it brick by brick, one choice at a time. And even when you don't feel like it, those moments of effort carry more weight than you can imagine. The idea that action comes after motivation is backward. In truth, action creates motivation. The body and brain operate on loops: behavioral, emotional, and physiological. And when these loops are interrupted by small, intentional actions, new circuits begin to form. These circuits don't just shift mood. They rewire the brain's ability to respond to life's challenges. Doing something as simple as putting on shoes and stepping outside breaks the inertia. It sends a clear message to the nervous system that the environment is worth interacting with. Over time, the act of consistently choosing forward movement becomes a habit, and habits, when grounded in biological principles, are powerful enough to override even deeply rooted feelings of despair. Each action becomes a vote for the kind of brain you want to live in. The more you vote, the stronger that system becomes. Depression often brings with it a fog of fatigue and apathy, but fatigue does not always mean rest is needed. It often means stimulation is lacking. Engaging in physical movement, especially outdoors, reignites dormant systems. Sunlight hitting the eyes in the morning activates brain areas responsible for alertness and mood regulation. Walking increases blood flow, enhances oxygen delivery, and boosts neurochemicals linked to emotional resilience. These are not abstract theories. They are observable, measurable processes within the body. You don't have to feel ready to act. You just have to start. Start with something so small that it's impossible to fail. The brain interprets success at any scale as reinforcement. Over time, that reinforcement turns into a ladder out of the darkness. Not overnight, not all at once, but undeniably, step by step. The beauty of the brain is that it responds to patterns, not perfection. Consistency trumps intensity every time. You don't need to accomplish great things to begin healing. You just need to repeat small wins. Wake up at the same time, even if you sleep poorly. Eat one nutrient-rich meal a day, even if the rest is disordered. Move your body for 5 minutes, even if your mind resists. These acts, repeated daily, become scaffolding for recovery. They provide rhythm, structure, and predictability, 3 things that depression often dismantles. With rhythm, the body knows what to expect. With structure, the mind has something to grasp onto. And with predictability, the nervous system begins to settle. This doesn't mean you won't struggle. It means you'll struggle with a strategy instead of surrender. There's a crucial difference between forcing yourself and guiding yourself. One is rooted in pressure, the other is rooted in care. When approaching action during depression, the goal isn't to push harder, it's to create gentle, repeatable momentum. You don't need to conquer the entire day. You need to win the next 5 minutes. Maybe that means opening the curtains, stepping into the shower, or texting a friend. These aren't grand achievements, but they're foundational. Each one disrupts the depressive pattern, even slightly, and every disruption is a crack in the armor of helplessness. Through these cracks, light can begin to enter. Not all at once, but enough to reveal that change is possible. You aren't faking your recovery by acting before you feel ready. You're initiating it. What begins as discipline often transforms into desire. At first, it may feel mechanical, doing things just because you've been told they help. But over time, those same actions can begin to feel rewarding in themselves. The dopamine system reawakens and the brain starts to anticipate pleasure again. You'll notice moments, brief but significant, where laughter returns, where food tastes good, where time passes without pain. These moments are not accidental. They are the result of actions stacking up until the brain remembers how to feel. When you understand that motivation is not a prerequisite but a result, you begin to take ownership of the process. You stop waiting for conditions to improve and start becoming the agent of improvement yourself. And that shift, internal and empowering, is the beginning of lasting change. Of course, the journey is not linear. There will be days when effort feels impossible, when nothing seems to work, and when darkness creeps back in. These days are not signs of failure. They are part of the cycle. The key is to keep returning to the basics. Return to movement, return to structure, return to breath. Depression may distort perception, but it cannot erase the impact of consistent action. Even when it feels like nothing is changing, your brain is adapting in ways you can't yet see. Trust the process, not the emotion. Trust the biology, not the narrative. Emotions may lie, data doesn't. And the data shows repeated actions change outcomes. You do not need to climb out of depression in a single leap. You only need to break its momentum, one decision at a time. Every forward step, no matter how small, is a protest against hopelessness. It's proof that you still have power, even if your mind tells you otherwise. The tools to change are not locked behind motivation. They are built into your daily choices. These tools are free, available, and backed by science. They're not shortcuts, but they are strategies. And when used consistently, they begin to do something profound. They return your brain to a state of engagement, of possibility, of life. You don't have to wait for motivation to arrive. You only have to take one action and let your biology do the rest. The brain is not a fixed machine. It is an adaptable, ever-changing organ shaped by how we use it. Every thought we think, every behavior we repeat, and every emotion we feel leaves an imprint on our neural circuits. This process, known as neuroplasticity, means that our brains are constantly being molded by experience. For someone battling depression, this truth holds immense power. It means that depression is not a life sentence, but a pattern that can be interrupted and replaced. While the experience of depression can feel deeply entrenched, it is not etched in stone. Repetition is what built the mental state, and repetition is what can change it. The same way depressive thoughts and habits have wired the brain toward despair, intentional practices can wire it toward resilience. There's no need for perfect control, just the willingness to begin influencing the system with purpose and consistency. Certain daily tools can significantly influence the brain's chemistry, structure, and function, especially when applied over time. Morning sunlight, for example, acts as a powerful regulator of mood and alertness by calibrating the body's internal clock. Exposure to natural light early in the day signals the brain to produce serotonin and reduces levels of melatonin, increasing wakefulness and a sense of well-being. Similarly, cold exposure, even just a few seconds in a cold shower, can activate adrenaline and dopamine pathways that boost alertness and mood. These interventions don't work because they're trendy or exciting. They work because they interact directly with the nervous system's wiring. The goal isn't to stack a dozen hacks, but to identify consistent, science-backed practices that create momentum. These small changes in the body generate a ripple effect in the brain, and once the brain starts to shift, how you feel and how you think begin to shift too. Another powerful tool for reshaping the mind is resistance training. Lifting weights or performing bodyweight exercises initiates a cascade of neurochemical changes that reduce inflammation, improve cognitive function, and enhance emotional resilience. It's not just about building physical strength. It's about reinforcing psychological flexibility and self-efficacy. The act of overcoming physical resistance mirrors the act of pushing through emotional stagnation. When the body learns that it can move, the brain remembers that it can progress. Additionally, exercise promotes the release of brain-directed neurotrophic factor, BDNF, a molecule that supports the growth and repair of neurons. With each workout, you're not just building muscle, you're reshaping the very architecture of the mind. That's why even short bursts of movement can be therapeutic. They don't just change the way you feel temporarily, they change the way your brain operates long-term. In addition to physical practices, cognitive tools play a vital role in shifting internal dialogue and thought patterns. One of the most effective strategies is narrative reframing. This involves becoming aware of the internal stories you tell yourself, especially those rooted in fear, guilt, or hopelessness, and deliberately choosing to reinterpret them. This doesn't mean ignoring problems or forcing positivity. It means recognizing that your interpretation of reality can change your emotional state, and your emotional state can change your behavior. For example, replacing "I always fail" with "I'm learning through effort" can have a measurable impact on brain circuits responsible for judgment and motivation. Over time, the brain learns to expect growth instead of defeat. This shift in mindset doesn't happen instantly, but with repetition, it becomes a habit. And when new habits take root, they change the brain's default settings, pulling you closer to stability and strength. Another technique that helps reshape the brain is focused visual attention. Where you direct your gaze influences what your brain prioritizes. Intentional visual focus, such as narrowing your vision on a single object during a task, activates neural circuits that enhance concentration and calm stress responses. This has practical applications for daily life. When you're overwhelmed, pausing to focus on something simple like your breath, your hands, or even a point on the wall can help deactivate the alarm systems in the brain. This isn't about escape, it's about grounding. When your eyes tell your brain that the world is manageable, your nervous system follows. Over time, practicing visual focus and grounding techniques trains the brain to remain centered, even in emotionally turbulent situations. That stability opens the door to clearer thinking, better decisions, and more emotional balance. Gratitude training is another surprisingly potent tool for influencing the emotional brain. It's not about pretending everything is okay. It's about intentionally directing your awareness toward things that support your well-being. Research shows that reflecting on moments of genuine gratitude activates the brain's reward systems and dampens activity in areas associated with fear and anxiety. The key is to focus on specific, emotionally impactful experiences rather than vague affirmations. For instance, remembering the feeling of a warm hug or a kind word can be more powerful than listing general things like health or family. Practicing this for even a few minutes a day can begin to shift the emotional tone of your inner world. It teaches your brain to find light in the dark, not by denying the darkness, but by balancing it with what is still good and grounding. That balance is what helps prevent relapse and supports long-term recovery. Sleep and circadian rhythm alignment are foundational to any effort to reshape the mind. When sleep is disrupted, nearly every system involved in mood regulation suffers. Cognitive function declines, emotional regulation weakens, and the brain becomes more reactive. On the other hand, aligning your sleep-wake cycle with natural light and darkness strengthens the entire nervous system, Going to bed and waking up at consistent times helps anchor the circadian clock, leading to more stable energy, hormone levels, and emotional balance. Even slight improvements in sleep quality can result in measurable changes in mood and cognitive clarity. This isn't just about getting 8 hours. It's about respecting the rhythms your brain and body evolved to follow. When you align with those rhythms, you stop fighting your biology and begin working with it, making every other tool more effective in the process. Social connection is also an essential part of the neuroplastic healing process. Isolation feeds depression by reinforcing the idea that you are alone and unsupported. But meaningful human interaction triggers the release of oxytocin and other bonding chemicals that counteract stress and fear. Even brief moments of shared experience, like eye contact, laughter, or touch, can recalibrate the nervous system. Building these moments doesn't require a huge social circle. 1 or 2 consistent, safe relationships can provide the relational stability needed for healing. Vulnerability is the bridge to connection. When you open up to others, even a little, you create the conditions for both your brain and theirs to heal. Connection is not a luxury, it's a requirement for thriving. And when it becomes part of your daily environment, it reinforces every other tool you use. The path out of depression is not about chasing happiness. It's about building systems that support mental health. These systems include physical practices, cognitive tools, emotional habits, and lifestyle structures. No single technique is a cure, but each one is a step forward. When layered together consistently, they become a scaffolding that holds you steady through life's challenges. The process won't be perfect. Some days will feel like setbacks. But even in struggle, you are training your brain. You are proving to your nervous system that life continues, that effort matters, and that change is possible. Over time, those neural pathways become stronger than the ones built by despair. What once felt like survival becomes self-mastery. And from that place of strength, you don't just escape depression, you build a mind that's ready to thrive.